We may soon see a WWE without any McMahon. Could this be classified, if this is true and it does happen, this would have to be the most shocking one after it looks like Vince was probably the one who really instituted and helped put this whole thing together. Welcome to another Wrestle Chat podcast, my friends. Thanks so much for watching on Wrestle Chat TV, on YouTube, or listening on the free iHeartRadio app. I'm your host. My name is the Ant-Man. Michael Glavin and I both had we had a different kind of shocked face last week. That was following the return of The Rock on SmackDown. Backed with shocked faces this week, but for a much different reason. I hate that we're actually starting this podcast off with unfortunate news. Lots of names have been removed from the talent roster at WWE, and probably the most head-scratching would be Dolph Ziggler, and maybe the most shocking, at least right now, would be Matt Riddle.
I'll tell you what, let's start with Dolph. Dolph was right down the middle for me. He's expressed his desire to get out of the business. You know, he's not spent a lot of time on TV. I think as a fan, I'm incredibly disappointed because I think while he had great time at the top as a world champion, I think there was still one more left in him. And so from a fan standpoint, I was really disappointed. From a business standpoint, I can't really say it's a bad decision. He only had about a year left on his contract. You know, I'm sure there were many conversations behind the scenes about how he's cool just to put people over. He's not worried about being front and center anymore, the whole thing. So it's a bummer, you know, on all accounts. And really, as we talk about all these releases, you know, we never want to be misconstrued as celebrating when someone loses their job. That's not what we're talking about here. We never, ever are happy that someone has lost their job, but we do also have to acknowledge that there's a business standpoint to it, and I'm sure that most of what we'll be talking about tonight in regards to those releases is more toward the business side than the individual side.
Yeah, certainly. You know, Dolph was, in my eyes, Dolph was a plug-and-play guy. One who could fill in, you know, at any moment and make any situation work. I personally believe that that's a big loss for WWE because you don't have a ton of those guys, and in fact, they let two of those guys go during this time. Although the best guess would be that Dolph will end up moving to AEW if he indeed does still, you know, want to get out there and be active. I think he's only 43 years old. Head to AEW because his brother's already there. And you can team up with your brother and have some fun on what seems to be perceptually a pretty free and loose place to go be creative. And if Dolph can mix some of his stand-up with his real-life wrestling ability, I mean, that might be a combination that we've never seen in WWE that could work on AEW. Another name that was on that list, too, was Shelton Benjamin. I kind of wonder if Shelton doesn't, you know, end up coming back to WWE at some point in a booker or producer role. I mean, he kind of seems like a guy who would be really great at explaining how to put together a great match because he could as well. I don't think he ever really connected very well, you know, personality wise, but bell to bell, I'm not sure that there was a better guy than Shelton Benjamin inside the ring. That would be only if you know, Shelton decided that's what he wanted to do and not wrestle anymore. I'm not sure at this point with the number of, we'll let this one slide. You know, we're going to let this one slide. We're going to take you off TV and we'll let this one slide for Matt Riddle, that this was really a shock to find out that he was in, I think the last piece of news that we've heard on who was let go in all of this. Is that a surprise to you?
No, it is not. And again, I would never rejoice in someone losing their job, but if anyone made business sense out of this entire bunch, it was Matt Riddle.
It was Matt Riddle.
And I mean, let's go down the list. I mean, first and foremost, dude doesn't wear clothes to work. I mean, my God, if we can get a single set of knee pads, elbow pads, boots, something something. Dude just was not wearing clothes to work. In the new WWE corporate setting, I think his character was a little bit too true to life. And I've heard rumblings that maybe he's not the most professional guy on screen as off screen. Now, I will never know that because I've not been around him. There's probably plenty of people that could refute that if untrue.
Sure.
But honestly, here's probably my longer take on it. I think Matt Riddle being released by WWE is the final stamping point of the end of WWE's experiment with MMA people.
Yeah.
I mean, we think about all of them that came through NXT when you were dealing with the anti-four horsewomen, you know, all those ladies that came in from MMA that were subsequently released. You had somebody like Sonya Deville who had this big MMA character for a while, and then they subtly pushed that off to the side. There's just plenty of examples why the whole MMA thing does not work in WWE, which is funny considering our present circumstance. and the
it's
idea
a clear
of these
line
big super shows.
Of separation between the two. That's what it is. Just push them all. I mean, if you're talking about him being the last one, there really is one more, Shayna Baszler, and I wonder if you don't see her character more. If that is true, if your thought there is true, maybe Shayna either moves back to UFC or her character changes a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's possible, but even with her, I've noticed that the further time goes along, she stays distant from that MMA persona. The most we've seen it was in this most recent rivalry with Ronda Rousey, where they really wanted to play up the MMA status. But elsewhere, and all of the rest of her character, I mean, she's the Queen of Spades. She's Shayna Baszler. They don't talk much about her from an MMA standpoint. So I think what we'll see is her character continue to drift closer and closer to a wrestling persona rather than an MMA persona.
A few more names on that list: Dana Brooke, Emma, Mansoor, and Mace. Shanky. Any of those catch you off guard, or did some of those? Did you go, I didn't know they even worked here anymore?
Most of them did not catch me off guard. I feel bad for Dana Brooke. She wanted it real bad. She really did. And I believe that, a lot of the things that were said about her behind the scenes, that she was a workhorse, that she really did care. She was trying, she was pitching ideas. But unfortunately, she just never really got over with the crowd. She had a little bit too much of that Rocky Maivia vibe to her, and it never really hit. And so I feel bad for her because she put in the time, she put in the work, but not surprising at all. As far as everybody else, obviously developmental talent. I think Matt Cardona said it best on Twitter. He's like, hey, this can be the worst day of your life, or it can be the best day of your life. And it's all about what you make of it. And I think we're going to see a lot of these people hit the indies. And I would not be surprised if we see some of them, back around the curve, I should say, here in a couple of years, maybe.
There is another name that could be out of WWE, and this one might shock some people if you're not keeping up on the business side. According to reports, Vince McMahon could actually be out. After the merger, Vince McMahon could be gone. In a TKO SEC filing, all of Vince's stock is up for sale. He owns just over 28 million shares, valued at just over $3 billion. TKO also said, that's the new company, in a regulatory filing that McMahon's membership on our board could expose us to negative publicity and or have other adverse financial and operational impacts on our business. His membership also may result in additional scrutiny or otherwise exasperate the other risks described herein. Any of these outcomes could directly or indirectly have adverse financial and operational impact on our business. Not only have we seen the end of a McMahon-controlled WWE, we may soon see a WWE without any McMahon. Could this be classified, if this is true and it does happen, This would have to be the most shocking one after it looks like Vince was probably the one who really instituted and helped put this whole thing together.
I don't know. I can't say that it's, unforeseen by any stretch of the imagination. Look, Vince is a smart guy, and he knows what situation he's in with his present legal troubles. Obviously, whatever the truth is very cloudy, because when you got money, you can make things cloudy. But at the end of the day, I don't think the man is stupid, obviously. And whatever happens next, I believe that he knew or has actively discussed the outcome with the powers that be at TKO. I don't think it's going to be some bait and switch where it's like, oh, you're telling me I can't be a part of it anymore? Nah, the guy knows what's up. And so it would not surprise me if, he was involved to broker the sale. He was going to be the executive chairman to make sure the stock price doesn't plummet in the meantime, or to build that bridge between WWE and UFC and this merger of TKO. I think his presence during the transition was very, very intentional. I don't think that it could have gone as smoothly as it did without him coming back and being in that role. But now that everything's settled, now that the checks have been cut, there's just one more to cut, and that's to see Vince ride off into the sunset with billions, I say with a B and a pinky to the mouth, billions of dollars.
And it can go out as a heel. Luckily, though, the Man-Child Chronicles podcast has not been sold to Endeavor yet. But you did drop a new episode last night. What's in this new episode?
Well, it was an interesting episode. Let me tell you why, because this is the first episode in 87, 88 episodes, whatever it is, that one of the core four was not on the episode.
Oh, really?
Because they were sick. And that guy was this guy.
Oh.
I got COVID again. And honestly, like, I wasn't experiencing like a lot of symptoms or anything, but sure. I had that COVID fatigue, and I was just so tired. And I was like, man, there's no way I can be funny right now. And so I sent the guys a message. I was like, guys, I just can't do it. But they stepped up. They did a great episode, despite lacking my natural charisma, charm, and humor. And they put on a great episode where they played a really, really fun game of $1 million butt. And if you don't know about that game, it's where you say, hey, I'll give you $1 million, but you got to deal with this particular situation in order to take the $1 million. And so I would encourage you guys to check it out. It was a really, really fun episode with those guys. Tons of great laughs. It was a real joy to edit it and to see all these funny jokes that came out of it. So you're not going to want to miss it.
Thank you for not telling them that you had something to do with the Wrestle Chat podcast and you couldn't be there. So don't make me the bad guy on that. Hey, listen, if you happen to be watching this episode on YouTube right now, just scroll down to other channels that we love. You'll see the Man-Child Chronicles right there. Click on it and hit subscribe. If you're listening on the free iHeartRadio app, check out the show's description for the link. Still, there is more WWE news. It has been a crazy couple of weeks. SmackDown and Fox, they are breaking up. The 5-year relationship is done next year. SmackDown is going to be moving to Friday nights next October to the USA Network. I remember when, the Fox deal was announced, they talked about the price tag because it was massive. It was over $1 billion. And the powers that be had some high expectations for SmackDown, I perceived. Now, I have no inside info on this, but just guessing here that the return on investment did not exceed what was coming out of the bank account for Fox. Do you see it being anything more than just not meeting the super high expectations that Fox may have had?
I don't know. That's tough to say without obviously seeing financials. I think that wrestling went through a huge boom, and I think Fox played a role in that. But if I'm being honest, I think we're just now seeing the fruits of the labor that went into, the fruit of the investment that went into that. Wrestling is bigger than ever, and quite the strange transition to see SmackDown move away from that. I'm not the professional. I'm not behind the scenes. It seems like a strange move on Fox's part. Now, granted, we do know that WWE asked for a significant premium, even on top of their previous deal. And for people that may or may not understand wrestling, it may have just been a little too much. But if I was the guys at Fox, I'd be a little worried, because you're talking, event after event after event is record after record after record right now. And so hopefully Fox doesn't come to regret this decision. But nonetheless, it's not the first time we've seen these deals come and go, and wrestling will carry on.
I know the new deal with NBC Universal includes 4 specials for NBC, for network NBC each year, but it's also the end of the current deal for Raw and NXT just at the end of the month before, at the end of September next year. There's a lot of talk that Disney Plus or Amazon or both are interested in Raw. Amazon has done huge numbers with Thursday Night Football with the NFL. With the majority of people cutting the cord and really streaming all of their content anyway via, like YouTube TV or Hulu. Is it a stretch to think that Raw on a streaming service wouldn't succeed?
I'm not sure. At first thought, it's like, man, how do you catch the casual fan? But at the same time, as you pointed out, with so many people cutting the cord, I mean, for instance, with me, I have Hulu TV, and the only thing that I use it for is wrestling. And so otherwise I stream every other bit of my content. And so from a logic standpoint, you go, man, how are you going to catch that casual fan that's just scrolling through the channels, if that's a thing anymore? And they see something cool happening, the set, the lights, the LED wall, the characters, the spectacle. But at the same time, is that really a factor anymore? So with wrestling more present in our lives than arguably ever before, is that WWE being ahead of the game yet again? I mean, I remember when the network was announced, people were like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to be a thing. This is a terrible idea. There were very few people that thought it was smart. And at the end of the day, one thing led to another, and you've got WWE programming operating on a premium, on streaming platforms. And so it's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it plays out.
Well, I think a case could be made that more people tune in, more casual fans tune in from social media presence than they do of just surfing TV. If they move Raw to another night, that's where I think most fans would have an issue. Listen, we don't abandon Saturdays in college football. We may add a day or two, especially at the beginning of the season, a Friday. The week 0 of college football, there's Thursday and Friday games or something like that. On Sundays, we don't abandon Sundays for pro football. Now, there are, every other day of the week for pro football. But I think if you change too much with Raw, i.e. you move it to a Tuesday or a Wednesday, plus you change it to a streaming service, that's where the issue could arise. Although I don't hate the sound of Wednesday Night Raw. I think that Tony Khan might, but I sure don't. Speaking of streaming and AEW, a word this week is that AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery are close to inking a deal that would bring AEW's pay-per-views to HBO Max. Guessing, much like WWE and Peacock and that relationship, with AEW moving to 12 premium live events each year. Is this the move that you personally think AEW needs to stay competitive in the top tier professional wrestling world?
I'm not sure. We've talked a lot about AEW's storytelling and the way they approach their product. And at first listen, there's two sides of me. The WWE person in me is like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's great. But then when I tangibly look at AEW, they're putting on a pay-per-view every Wednesday night. And so it's, for me, it's like, what else are you going to do? I mean, unless you start, going the WWE route that you're, I hate to say it, watering down the weekly product to benefit the monthly product. Okay. But I think part of what AEW has going for it is the fact that you can tune into AEW and any given week, you're going to see something that did not waste your time. And so I'm a little nervous about what the implications are, because from a business standpoint, somebody walks up to Tony Khan and says, hey man, I'm going to give you X million, billion dollars, whatever, and we want to put some pay-per-views on HBO Max. It's the same thing he said with Collision. He's like, I wasn't looking for a Saturday, but if they're going to give me money for it, I'll give them a Saturday.
Sure.
And
why
so,
not?
at the same time, what does that do to the product? I would argue some of the most golden days of wrestling pay-per-views were in that kind of 90s, early 2000s era when you were paying $60 for a pay-per-view, but because you were paying $60 for a pay-per-view, you got your money's worth every time. And so there's a lot of threads to follow in something like this. It's going to be a great business decision, but my question is, what does it do to the content?
Well, I know one of the shows that they want to add to that 12-show lineup every year is Grand Slam. And it's taken place over the last 3 years at Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. They stretch it out over a Wednesday to Friday's Rampage. We saw some big things happen there this week. Some good, some were not so good. I'll start off with the good, especially since we started this podcast with the unfortunate. So we'll start this with the good. We do have a new Ring of Honor World Champion. This is big. Congrats to Eddie Kingston. He beat Claudio Castagnoli in a title versus title match. Eddie Kingston having a New Japan, I don't remember which title it is, but he has a New Japan title, and so it was title for title, and now he's got 2 belts. These two are a great example of how you turn real life heat into money. Do you think that Tony could stand to use this scenario that they just exemplified on television and in this storyline as an example to the guys in the locker room?
Absolutely. I think this is the for lack of a better way to say it, the coming of age story and mixing, kayfabe and reality, if you will, in the AEW. We've seen Vince do it for years. For me, some of the most notable ones, you take Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. You've got Matt Hardy and Edge. You've got, some of these situations where there was real life issues and it was spun into pure gold and only the way a McMahon could. And it's interesting to see that happen on the AEW side now. And I think one of the things that I respect most about the wrestling business that honestly you don't see in any other combat or impact sport, that you can just hate a guy, but there's a certain amount of honor that comes in when you know that you're going to do everything possible to protect that guy when you get into the ring together. And if you don't, you become an exile in the community of professional wrestling. And so it's cool to see that that tension turned into something great. But I do think it's a message to the locker room that says, hey, if you've got beef with somebody, great, let's put it on TV and let's make some money off of it.
Something else that we saw was the crowning of a new international champion. Big congratulations to Rey Fenix, although a very unfortunate ending to this match. From everything I heard, him winning that title was not the plan when they started that match. But Moxley suffered a concussion during the match. Then, after Rick Knox didn't count John's shoulders to the mat, and what was the most blatant exposure of the business is like, we'll get into that in a second, but Ray ends up giving John Moxley that sit down over the shoulder pile driver that it looks dangerous in the first place, and then you see his head contact the mat and you see the compression of his spine. It looked like it nearly broke John's neck. We've seen several maneuvers that, we as fans have perceived to be unsafe. One in particular was with the match with Omega and Ospreay. I know WWE has some moves that they have banned. These are moves that you can't do in matches in WWE. Do you think it's time to institute maybe a little list for AEW?
Absolutely. Immediately when I saw that match, where my brain went to was back in the day with, I believe it was Owen Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Stone Cold.
It was Owen or Brett. I can't remember.
It was Owen. Yeah.
But It was Owen, yeah. And with the sit down DDT brain buster, whatever that was, and Steve just slipped a few inches too far down between Owen's legs and just got his spine compressed, and the ramifications over decades. And we saw the echo of that in this exact move too, in that man just sitting down a little too far, and it, to be honest, it's not worth it. Yeah. And so yes, we should absolutely be banning moves, especially when it comes to, as the world continues to learn more about CTE and head injuries and all this type of stuff. Man, my entertainment and my shock of a maneuver is not worth somebody else's health. And so I know that everybody agreed to do that, and it's something that 99.9% of the time goes well. But man, when you're dealing with that 0.01 chance that you can just mess up somebody's life, like let's work as safe as we can in a dangerous sport.
It changed Steve Austin's life and his career. That was it was supposed to be a tombstone where you go to your knees, and Owen went to his butt like a normal pile driver. And when you do that faced the opposite way, your head's 2 inches below your butt. And that's why Steve's head hit the mat. There's also, a rule in WWE that if a ref can count to 3 because the talent doesn't kick out, he counts to 3. I just thought that was like standard through all of pro wrestling. And if that was the only thing Rick Knox had missed recently, I'm sure many would just let it slide. But there is a lot there that he was responsible for that many are saying should cost him some time. You have any thoughts on that? I mean, I know it's easy to blame the ref, but I mean, there was a lot of things that went, yeah, he should have caught this and we should have ended this, and we definitely should have counted to 3 when his shoulder stayed on the mat and the dude didn't move. What do you think here?
Yeah, again, I don't ever want to speak in a way where I don't put myself in that situation. And so being Rick, like, hey man, I got this job. I'm trying to feed my family, trying to do all this stuff. I mean, I don't know what the career path after getting fired as a professional wrestling referee is. I don't know what that looks like, but it doesn't seem like a long trail of opportunities. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
sure.
So, do I believe that, something needs to happen? In terms of, is he still a ref? Yeah, I think there's a lot to consider there in terms of the performance as a referee. I don't ever want to see anybody lose their job, especially when they're established in the professional wrestling business. But,
sure,
sometimes you can find other roles for people that make a little bit more sense. But there was a lot missed in that match. And, man, just absolutely scary to see that stuff happen.
I hope John is okay, and I'm sure by the time that we upload this video to YouTube and the audio to iHeart, more's going to change in the world of professional wrestling. If it does, we're going to be there with you chatting about it. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at WrestleChatTV. That's all the time that we've got this week. For Michael Glavin, I'm the Ant-Man, and we're going to see you next week here on the Wrestle Chat Podcast.